Bore da, morning everybody, lovely to see you as always. If you could put yourselves on mute now, that would be really helpful. It just helps with sound. Just a bit of housekeeping, we are recording, so this will go onto the Knowledge Hub, so that you can watch it at your leisure at a later date. If you've got any problems with being on the recording, just contact us and let us know so we can ensure that that's removed if necessary. As I said, if you can mute during the session, that would be great. There's a Q&A at the end as well, but if you have burning questions, please put them into the chat box, which I'm sure most of you would know now. But if you don't, if you hover over the bottom or the top of your screen, whichever it may be, there's a chat box there, and you can click on that and type in your questions. So feel free to do that, and Ruth will stop at various points and answer those, or I'll give her a nudge if we've got a few questions building up. So please do ask questions, it helps, I think, and I'm sure there'll be other people wanting to know the same thing if you do. Just to tell you a little bit about Tyfu Cymru, it offers 100% funded support, advice, training, study tours, visits, hopefully very soon, which would be nice, to commercial horticultural businesses. So if there's anything that you specifically would like support with, please do get in touch and we can set that up for you, hopefully. Just to give you a little bit of background about Cae Tan. Cae Tan's a CSA, so Community Supported Agriculture, based on the Gower Peninsula in South Wales, and they supply fresh seasonal produce to their members through their fantastic box scheme all year round. It's a fabulous place if you haven't visited already. A little intro about Ruth. Ruth Evans is an accountant, sits on the board for Cae Tan, and we're absolutely thrilled that she's doing this session for us because it's something that we've been asking for some time. So I'm going to pass you over to Ruth.
Hello everybody, thanks Debbie for handing over. Nice to see some different faces, even if we're just looking at each other over a screen. So yes, just to say, I'm an accountant, as Debbie said. I'm a qualified chartered accountant many years ago in a previous life before we had a family. And these days I've several different jobs, but one of them is being director of Cae Tan for part-time, couple of days a week. I look after all the finance and the funding, and also do all the membership admin for Cae Tan, which also now includes a second CSA which just started up last year, Big Meadow, which is also based on the Gower, a bit further down the Gower, right down in Llangennith. When I'm not working for Cae Tan, I also work for Coed Vark, which is a little tree nursery based here in Swansea, and for Swansea Forest School, and then also for two solar companies for Gower Regen and Gower Power. So I'm really lucky to work for some fantastic environmental organisations, to give them a little plug, and you know, some really lovely people to work with. So I've been involved with Cae Tan since when it first started in 2014. Tom first started growing crops in 2015 for about 45 households. Cae Tan itself now are supplying 130 households with weekly seasonal veg boxes, and Big Meadow, which just started last year, are supplying a further 60 households down the Gower. We've still got a waiting list of 80 odd households waiting to join Cae Tan. And as well as those two CSAs, Cae Tan has a salads project. So we've got a lady who works as a salads grower and sells bags of salads into local shops and also into cafes and restaurants when they're open. And we employ an education officer, and we run a sustainable schools programme. So Cae Tan's grown into quite a big, you know, quite a complex business, and our turnover last year was 115,000. So it just shows what, you know, the potential that started from a basic CSA supplying 40 or 50 households, and within 6 or 7 years now has grown into something quite a lot more than that. We're also running training programs, starting to run training programs this year as well. Yes, to say we've got a waiting list. I read that actually demand for veg box schemes has doubled since the start of COVID, and I'm actually sharing advice with other CSAs now on how to manage waiting lists. So I think it shows there is a real demand for veg box schemes, which is great, and it's a, you know, it's a really good time to be thinking about setting up a scheme. So I'll share my screen with you now, and I've got a PowerPoint presentation which we'll run through. hopefully everyone can see that now, and we'll just minimize those pictures. So here's just what we're the slides that I'm going to run through, which is just about planning your veg box scheme, what that might look like, the different types of scheme, and a little bit about CSA. Also talk about the what legal structures you might want that to take, what your setup costs might be, and costing those and thinking about that, what your ongoing costs are likely to be, and also talk a little bit about the other costs and overheads that you need to think about just to make sure that you're covering all your costs, and a little bit about how you might sort of keep records and record those income and costs, the bookkeeping side of things. So when I'm not sure exactly what stage you're all at, but right, sort of going back right to the beginning, thinking about your veg box scheme, I've just put here a list of questions, which really are the questions you need to ask and to think about before you can begin to have an idea of what your forecast income might be for your project. So perhaps the first one is just the kind of scale of your project. How many boxes are you likely to grow for, both when you start off and then perhaps, you know, scaling up in future years? Who will you sell to, and where is the demand? So I think there is a lot of demand out there now, but do you know that in your area there's likely to be you know, households that are going to want to buy the number of boxes that you're aiming to grow for? And then thinking about what the boxes themselves are going to look like and what will be in the boxes. So most veg box schemes, you know, offer a seasonal selection of veg, but will there be some expectation from your households, from your members, from your consumers about what will be in those boxes, whether there's a certain weight or quantity that you're going to supply? Are you going to give people an element of choice? You know, sometimes with Cae Tan, we've got people say they don't like potatoes, could we have something else? The Cae Tan scheme doesn't allow for that. Everybody just has a seasonal box, which obviously makes life a bit easier for the grower. Then are you going to grow through, you know, are you going to supply boxes right through the winter? If you are, how are you going to cover the hungry gap, you know, which is sort of starting now and running up until June or July, when the harvest really starts to come in from the field? And if you are managing people's expectations of what they might expect through that hungry gap. Then from obviously from the finance income point of view, how are you going to charge your customers? Are they going to pay monthly? Are they going to pay monthly up front? Are you going to ask them for a deposit? Is it going to be a more flexible scheme where they just pay weekly for the veg they have? And also, how are you going to collect that payment? There may be there may be a cost if you use certain systems. Then, you know, card systems will deduct a percentage from your income before it comes to you. Then there's the pricing of the box, thinking about comparing it with other schemes, both nearby you and further afield, so that you know what is a reasonable price that you will be able to charge, but also is that price going to cover all your costs? And we'll come on to how you sort of calculate what those total costs might be. Then also, are people going to come to you? Are you going to have a hub and people are going to come to you and collect their veg, or are you going to deliver it? Because obviously there are costs there. Perhaps you're going to charge people for delivery. So I think that's perhaps not exclusive, but that's an idea of the questions that you need to be thinking about to give an idea then of, you might be able to have a forecast for what your income might be, when your income might start coming in, and what it might look like on an annual basis. One other thing I thought of after I put this slide together is, if you've got surplus veg, are you going to be able to perhaps sell your surplus veg, and that might be a little bit of additional income that might come into your project. So types of veg box scheme. I mean, a veg box scheme really just means any scheme that provides boxes of vegetables or fruit direct to local consumers. And I think you can see from those list of questions that the box scheme can take quite a lot of different forms, and also can be quite flexible and can be set up as you want it to work as the grower. Cae Tan is a community supported agriculture scheme, as we've said, which is a box scheme, but it's a box scheme with a difference. So it's much more of a partnership between the people who receive the veg, our members, and the growers. And the idea is that the risks and rewards of the farmer are shared then with between the farmer and the members. So if there's a good harvest, you'll have a bit more in your box, and if the harvest is not good, there might be a bit less in your box. So people sign up to pay regular monthly subscriptions through the year to Cae Tan, and you know, continue to pay if they're away on holiday, for instance, and their veg, you know, they can get a neighbour to pick up veg, or the veg gets donated to a food bank. But it's really asking members to make a commitment to pay a regular amount. We also ask people when they join to pay a deposit, and we ask people to pay up front for their veg, so they pay at the start of the month for the veg they're going to receive for that month. So that helps us with our working capital and also with our cash flow. Legal structures. So I've put some nice pictures of some nice Cae Tan veg in the background so far. The legal structures is a bit bland, so we've got a picture of some, this is our potato store, where we keep our potatoes stored through the winter. So if you're just starting out, and perhaps you're just one grower on a bit of land to produce, you know, a small number of veg boxes, you're probably just going to be a sole trader. It's very simple, very easy to get started. Really, all you need is a bank account, and it's the lowest cost option as well, because you don't have a commitment of preparing accounts or tax returns, and obviously there's a cost along to doing that. The next thing is you might want to be a limited company if you're a bigger business, and the attraction of that is obviously that you get limited liability. That's what you know, companies came into existence for, really, to allow people to have limited liability. But with being a company obviously comes legal obligations. So you need to prepare Companies House, which have to company accounts which have to be filed with Companies House, and you'll have to do corporation tax returns. So chances are you're going to have to pay a firm of accountants to do that each year, and there'll be a cost associated with that. A type of limited company, which you might want to think about, is a community interest company. This is more a vehicle for social enterprises, really, you know, with a community interest that are set up for a social purpose rather than making a profit. Cae Tan is not a KIC, it's a limited company, it's limited by guarantee. And we have managed to access funding through just being a limited company by guarantee, but being a community interest company gives you a bit more of a rubber stamp, really, for funders. And if you're going to be looking for funding for the community work you do or for your setup costs, being a community interest company might make that funding a bit more accessible. So going from there, you've begun to think about what your veg box scheme might look like, and the next thing then is to think about your setting up costs. So these are just going to arise only once. They're one-off costs, but they're going to be incurred before you can start generating income. With growing projects, there's always a lead-in time before you can start bringing your first harvest out of the field and start you know, selling and generating income. So you need to plan and think about how growers' remuneration is going to be covered for that lead-in time. And I think both with Cae Tan and Big Meadow, we started paying growers, you know, March or a bit earlier in the year, but the first income didn't come in until end of June, early July, when the first crops were ready for the field and we could start producing the first boxes. So you're going to have probably 3 or 4 months there where you've got people working, but no income coming in. Land costs obviously depends on whether you've got your own land or whether you're going to be renting land. Both with Cae Tan and Big Meadow, we've been very lucky to work with friendly landlords who've given us the first 6 months or year on the field for free, so that we've been able to use the land for free until we've been able to generate income. You need to think about obviously preparing the field or the site, you know, fencing, gates, everything that needs to be able to make the site secure and ready for you to work. ploughing, you know, whatever else needs doing to the growing area, and actually getting those first crops in the ground and growing. Polytunnels, I think most veg box schemes now have at least one polytunnel to help, you know, obviously with the growing season and growing the range of veg that people tend to expect now in their veg box. You might need to think about a compost toilet, so you've got some facilities for your staff and for your volunteers if you're going to have volunteers. And then where you're going to store your veg boxes, particularly if people are going to come to the field to collect, you're going to need some kind of dry sheltered area where you can store those boxes for people to come and pick up. Farming equipment, obviously, you guys probably know better than I do what you're going to need, but from small, you know, all the small stuff from the spades and forks and hoes right up to what bigger equipment, depending on what scale you're working at. You might need a tractor, you might need a delivery vehicle if you're planning to deliver, so you need to think about the cost of that. And then I've just put irrigation equipment because obviously you're going to need to get all the crops watered somehow. So, you know, think about what you need, and then think about, you know, getting quotes and start to tot those figures up to see how much you're going to need, and then think about whether you're going to apply for a loan or whether you're going to apply for funding and how you're going to cover those setup costs. So just going on then to looking at sort of annual and ongoing costs. So once you're actually up and running and you're generating income with you know, your weekly veg boxes, here's sort of the farming costs that you're going to need to think about on an ongoing basis. And if you're trying to put forecasts together or a business plan together, here's a list of the things that you need to think about to include. So obviously the growers are going to need paying for what they're doing. Our growers in Cae Tan all work seasonal hours, so they work 4 days through the summer months from April to September, and then they go down to 2 days through the winter months. So you just need to think about how much growers' salaries are going to work out at. There will probably be some travel costs. I mean, with VegBox, the whole sort of purpose of VegBox schemes is keeping food miles to a minimum, and they do, but there probably will be some a little bit of backwards and forwards. Our veg pickup hub, which is what you can see in the background here in this picture, is a little way away from the field, so the veg comes backwards and forwards. If you're going to work with volunteers, it's always good practice to offer to cover your volunteers' expenses for getting to the field and any expenses they incur through coming to work for you. You're going to need the seeds and plants, obviously, compost, manure, all the small tools and equipment, which, you know, have a short lifespan and are going to, you know, an element of them are going to need replacing each year. Water costs, if you're attached to mains water supply, going to have some water bills. There will be materials, consumables, little bits and pieces that you need, and packaging we try and keep. You can see in the picture here there's virtually no packaging with Cae Tan's veg, but we do buy in some biodegradable bags for our salads and for the you know, for the green leaves, for the spinach and chard, that type of thing. We don't have delivery costs, all our members come and pick up, but if you're going to deliver, then obviously there'll be some costs of that. Repairs and maintenance, I find one of the hardest things to forecast with Cae Tan, particularly with our tractors, which are quite old and tend to break down on a regular basis, is how much that figure is going to be. Then if you're buying in produce, you'll need to put in a cost for that. You'll need to estimate how much you're going to buy in and how much that might cost. So moving on to, so that the previous slide was all your farming costs, but on top of that, you're going to have some other costs and some overheads. And in case we're getting a bit overloaded, I just put a picture here. This is Cae Tan's wildlife pond. It's a very lovely winter picture of the pond. And we've actually got a mother duck and about a dozen ducklings swimming about on it at the moment. So that's really nice. So just running through what those other costs might be, just to make sure that you include all these costs as well, so that overall your income covers these costs as well as your farming costs, so that you get down to at least breaking even at the end of the day. So the staff training, PPE, you know, boots, clothes, waterproofs, those kind of things that you might need for your growers. Depending on how it works with your site and the land that you're using, there's probably going to be some rent or leasing costs. Need to think about who's going to cover the admin side and the finance side. If it's just you on your own, that just might be that you're doing that as well. If you're a bigger size operation, you might want to employ somebody just on a part-time basis to cover that, as I do for Cae Tan. Whatever shape, size, scale your project is going to take, you're going to need insurance. You probably need employer's liability. You will need public liability insurance. So you definitely need to think about that cost. If you're a limited company, there's going to be a cost incurred in preparing company accounts and your tax returns. If you employ people and you're not running a payroll in-house, then you'll need to pay a payroll provider just to run your payroll for you each week or each month. Generally, you will find there's some computer and internet costs. I think everybody, a laptop at a minimum, but most people then would want a website set up so that you can interact with your customers, and that you can get new customers sign up, etc., through an internet. Most people expect that as a minimum an internet site and Facebook page. Dues and subscriptions. For Cae Tan, we just belong to the Land Workers Alliance and the CSA network. But if you're going to be certified organic, there'll be annual costs there as well, with your license fee, etc., for being certified organic. You might need an accounts package. If you're going to use an accounts package, there's usually a monthly subscription with that now for using something like QuickBooks or Xero. Few office costs. At Cae Tan, we don't have an office. I'm based at home. Everybody does their admin and office work at home, but there will be just a few small costs for a bit of printing and stationery, although we keep that to an absolute minimum, and it is quite a small cost. If you've got big assets, such as a vehicle or a polytunnel or a barn, then there'll be a depreciation charge, which is just writing off the cost of that asset in chunks over its useful life. And then there's always a few other contingencies or miscellaneous bits and pieces that you need to think about as well. Okay, so bean counting, or thinking about recording your income and costs. These are some very, very tasty Bolotti beans that our growers grew this year. They were really nice. So just to say, whatever size and scale your project is, always really start from the bank account, and it's making sure that all your transactions are correctly recorded. And the same goes for petty cash if you're running a petty cash system. And then match the system to your needs and what suits you best. So decide, depending on what a scale of project and how complex it's going to be. If you're a smaller project, just a sole trader, then just an Excel spreadsheet might be enough. And if you've got a Gmail, you can just use Google Docs, and then that's very easy to share with other people. At Cae Tan, we use QuickBooks. I've used Xero with other companies that I work for as well. Both of those are very flexible and user friendly, and you can, it's very easy to record information through a phone or a tablet, so you can do that when you're out and about. And it's very easy then for an accountant to pick up the records from there and actually turn them into your annual accounts. There are also, we use with Big Meadow, we use Square for all our members invoicing, which is a really good free. The app is free, and it will just generate regular invoices for you without you having to remember to do that, and it'll tell you who's paid and who hasn't. So it's a very good way of managing your membership income. There is a downside, of course, that the app is free, but they take, I think it's 2.5% off you before the money actually comes into your bank account. Okay, that's the last slide in my PowerPoint presentation. So I'll stop sharing my screen now, and then we'll see if have we got any questions in the chat?
No.
No. Does anybody want to? We've got quite a bit of time now left. Does anybody want to ask questions, or do you want me to talk? So I'm quite happy to talk some more about how Cae Tan works and how our accounting system works.
Hi, sorry, this is Rachel. I've joined a bit late. I'm sorry, I haven't got the video on because I'm not very presentable.
That's okay, Rachel.
Trying to clean at the same time. Yeah, we run a box scheme with Off My Land. Is mainly meat that we do, and basically through our veg, then people find us and buy lamb and beef off us, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
That's kind of why we're doing it. But you know, I've got the garden planted and everything. The thing I'm struggling with a bit is price of cardboard has shot up. And who do you use to supply your boxes? That's all I was sort of.
So the price of what has shot up? I didn't quite.
Cardboard.
Cardboard.
Yeah, sort of Amazon, you know, because everybody's having deliveries at the minute. You know, we are finding
Yes, of course.
our meat boxes. I mean, the same with our meat boxes. The abattoir, we just use their boxes because they're food grade and proper. They'd be happy for us to use our own, but yeah, unless you buy thousands of them, we're struggling a little bit to find a supplier. And I didn't know if you'd had.
No, that's because it's just veg with Cae Tan. We've just got wooden crates, and the veg just goes into wooden crates. People bring their own bags, tip the veg out of the box into a bag and take it home with them. So it's not something that we've had to source, but I can well believe that that's the case with everybody ordering everything online. There's a huge amount of cardboard, isn't there, gets used in that.
And that's it. I mean, we're happy, and they do reuse it. Our customers are brilliant. So when we go back, we can swap boxes and stuff. But it's, you know, it's just tidier to have something that's a system that's just a bit better than, I've got on my last box again now, I've got to, you know, find another one. But yeah, okay, no, that's a good idea, because obviously they pick up, we deliver to people. So, and I mean, people are happy to have them in bags, but it just doesn't look very nice, does it?
No, we have got a couple of meat suppliers who supply meat into Cae Tan members, so I can ask them that question, Rachel, and I can maybe put you in touch with them, and you can you know,
thank you. I mean, even if if they, you know, they're asking for thousands, we can go halves with someone, you know.
Yes, if you could share as well. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be happy with that, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that.
And Rachel, Owen said try Kite packaging for cardboard.
Kite packaging. Oh, okay. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Kite packaging, brilliant.
Thanks, Owen. Matt, did you want to ask a question? You're on mute.
Yeah, I won't mind doing. It might make me sound a bit daft, but we've never quite worked out, and it's definitely a question for an accountant, between weeks and months, because we worked out if we were going to invoice people per month, every now and then a month's longer, and I felt like I was like sneaking in the odd free veg box. So we invoice people on a weekly basis, which is fine, but particularly whilst we're training people into that CSA model, people are like, oh, it's a bit warm this week, I don't want my veg, and they don't pay for that week and stuff, which is fine, it's an evolution. But can you just explain weeks and months and invoices?
Yes,
I love that.
yeah. So what we do on our a small box is £7.85 a week, and a large box, I think I've just checked, is £13. So what I do is take the £7.85, multiply it up for 52, and then divide it by 12. So it means that people are paying you the correct weekly amount, but you've just divvied it up into 12 equal installments. So you pay the same amount whether it's a 4 or 5 week, but it's just, it's a good way of, because I mean, months, you've got less accounting, haven't you, if you charge them monthly? Yeah, and you can also, I mean, all our members pay at the start of the month for the month ahead, so it helps with your cash flow as well.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. Ideal.
Brilliant. Good. Is there anybody else, or would is it helpful if I go into a bit more depth about how Cae Tan, you know, how we work with Cae Tan? Yeah, a couple of nods there. So Cae Tan, we run Cae Tan on QuickBooks accounting software, which I find quite easy to use. And I'm an accountant, but also our growers, both Francesca, who does our salads growing, and Abby, who has just started with Big Meadow CSA, and other companies I work for. I know other people who are not accountants find it quite easy to use, both with the invoicing system. But what we've done with Big Meadow is we invoice people through Square, which is great. You can just create, if you're going to charge people monthly, you can just create a monthly recurring invoice. And so the app will just raise an invoice for everybody at the start of each month. It gets emailed out. You can save, and then people can pay by card, but they can also ask it to remember their card. So it will just very quickly, very easily take a payment off them each month. And then it just sends you back anybody who hasn't paid, tells you who's paid, and then puts the money in your bank account. So it's a very easy way of managing your membership side. They take 2.5% off of you, but I guess it's saving you, that is cheaper than paying for somebody to, certainly it's cheaper than paying for a member of staff to sit down and manually do that. With Cae Tan, when we first started out, we just got everybody paying by standing order. So the huge advantage of that is every penny comes straight into Cae Tan's bank account. But I'm increasingly finding, especially now I've got 130 households, we want to increase our prices a little bit this spring. The last time we increased our prices, it took me about 18 months before everybody had changed their standing order. It took a huge amount of chasing and going around, getting in touch with people to get everybody to do it. And not everybody is great at online banking, and standing orders are a bit old-fashioned now. Not everybody knows what they are or how to change them very easily. So I'm going to move Cae Tan over to the Square system before we do that pricing piece, because obviously once you're using something like Square, you just tell Square to increase the monthly amount, and it just does it. And then providing people are happy with that, they just authorize it goes to them by an email, they just authorize it, or if it's remembered their card details, it just goes straight through. So I think even though we're going to lose the 2.5%, and if you add up how much that is for all our boxes over a year, I think that comes to about £1,500. I think it's it's probably the only way that we can go forward. Just makes it a lot easier to manage. And of course, if you're going to do that, you just need to, when we were thinking about total costs, you just need to make sure that you price that fee that they're going to charge you into your total costs. So whatever the price you think needs to be for your veg box, you just need to add that 2.5% back on, just to make sure that you're fully covered if you're going to use that kind of system. We do Cae Tan do buy in produce. So we've got two CSAs within Cae Tan now. We've got Cae Tan and we also got Big Meadow, and they work on a slightly different way. So Big Meadow is much newer and does buy in all its winter veg. But I think Abby, who's the grower in charge of Big Meadow, the model is that with the amount of land she's got, she's just going to grow veg through the main summer, autumn growing and harvesting season, and in the winter she will always buy in veg to top up the boxes. And we always try and source it from as local and organic supplier as we can. We buy in from C&M Organics at the moment. The thing is, once you get into the Hungry Gap, even that organic produce is coming from farther and farther afield because it just isn't available locally. Cae Tan is different. The actual Cae Tan CSA is different. It's a bigger CSA. We've got more land, and we do aim to try and grow all our winter veg right through the season. So farming being what it is, that sometimes works better some years than others. The first year on our new land was fantastic. We didn't buy in any produce at all. And then the second year, the potatoes got planted in a different field and they all got wireworm. So that didn't work very well, and we had to buy in potatoes that year. This year, we've just started now to buy in some veg, and we will be buying in, I think, sort of some potatoes, carrots, onions to keep us going through now till the end of June, or as soon, depending on how the weather goes, as soon as we've got sufficient produce available from the field, then we'll stop buying in.
Ruth, can I just take you back to Patrick's question?
Yeah.
It was one of the first ones. How long do you stretch depreciation of equipment for?
It depends what it is. So polytunnels, we usually write those off over 5 years. I mean, you would hope that a polytunnel would last a bit longer than that, but it's very reasonable just to write it off over five years. I mean, there's probably a few blown away in the storm over the country last night, I would imagine, or had the plastic ripped off, sadly. Hopefully not Cae Tans. And so polytunnels I usually do over 5 years. Vehicles we usually do over 5 years. We've got a barn. That we're appreciating over 10 years. That's, you know, something you'd expect to last much longer. So really, it should depend on a reasonable estimate of the useful life of the asset. So if you think you're going to be using it pretty much definitely for the next 10 years, then 10 years is a good period to write it off. Yes, Ali.
Well, I just want to go back to what you were saying about Square. I don't know what Square's terms and conditions are, but I know iZettle, which is what I use,
yes,
specifically say you cannot increase your prices to cover the 1.75% that they take.
Oh, right, okay. But you would but you can set your price to make sure that you cover all your costs. So you can't have presumably you're going to treat all your members the same. So I think what they're saying there is what you can't do is say to members, if you pay me direct, it's this much, but if you go through iZettle, I'm going to add on a 2.5%. But when you are it's up to you and nobody can tell you what your price for your veg box should be. So what I meant really was just when you set your price, you need to make an allowance for that 2.5% that's going to come.
I just thought it was important to.
It is, yes. No, you're absolutely right, Ali. Yeah, that's a really good point to raise.
There was a follow-on question from James, which was, where did you find your customers from early on?
I think when we've started with Cae Tan and well, certainly when we started with Cae Tan, Tom is a local grower and he knows a lot of people on the Gower, and I think, you know, the first 10 or 20 probably came from word of mouth, and a lot of it went round by word of mouth. I mean, going back to 2015, I mean, CSA was a very new thing then, and people hadn't really heard about it. It's much more. You know, there are more veg box schemes and more CSA schemes now, so it's easier. And we just started with 45 and then increased it to about 90 in the second year. So it was really just advertising through, through Facebook, website, and just getting the word around locally. Tom does talks and presentations sometimes about what we do to community groups. It's just getting your face and your name out there and recognised. I think with veg box, especially with CSA, but with any veg box schemes, it is about trusting the grower, isn't it? When people sign, people are a bit cautious about signing up, but if they get to know your face and hear you talk about what you do, builds up a bit of trust, and then people are much more ready to sign up. But as I say, the demand, certainly everything you read at the moment says that the demand for veg box schemes is huge. And so I think that's much less of a problem now than perhaps it has been in the past.
And I can see that Sarah's put in the chat. I was going to say it actually, Sarah, you read my mind, that there's actually a session on the 6th on this week on getting the most out of Facebook and Instagram in your marketing strategy. So, you know, if you're looking for customers, that might be, or you're looking to develop your scheme further, that might be a useful session.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean the great thing with CSA is when I'm looking at our financial forecast for next year, I've got 130 members and I've got a waiting list, so I pretty much know that we're going to be supplying 130 households through the year, and I can say with, you know, a fairly good degree of certainty, I know what our income from our veg boxes is going to be for the next year. It won't fluctuate through the season, and you know, this many people will buy this many boxes, so they what inevitably does fluctuate with farming is the costs. So what I can't know is how good our harvest is going to be and how much we're going to need to buy in next year. I can make an estimate based on previous years, but I might be wrong. And then every time Tom says the tractor needs to go anywhere near any repairs, I get a little bit That's probably going to be expensive, but yes, it does at least take that's the joy of CSA, is it takes a lot of the uncertainty out of your income streams. You pretty much know what your income is going to be. Sorry, are there any more questions in the
There is. There's one from Maria. It's we're starting a very small scheme, 20 boxes. I've registered as a KIC. Would I be able to do company's house report, corporation tax myself, or do we need?
I don't know. I think you do need to use an accountancy firm for that, especially the corporation tax. You have to have specialist software now to do corporation tax returns. I'm a qualified accountant, but I don't do the company's house accounts or the corporation tax returns for any of the companies that I work for. We use a small local firm of accountants just to produce our accounts, so that they're in the right absolutely in the right format to file for Companies House. And you'll it's I'm not trying to bang my own drum because I'm an accountant, but you tend to find it's worth paying the fees. They'll keep your corporation tax bill to a minimum, and usually you pay for the accounts and the corporation tax as one thing. So I think there were, there was a time when you could do that. Like, I've got my own self-employed accountancy business. There was a time when you could do that, just do Companies House accounts for people. But with the software requirements now, it's just, it would be too expensive for me to keep up with all that software and keep sufficiently up to date to be able to do it. So you're better off paying a firm of accountants.
And you can get, Maria, you can get charitable accountants or accountants who are used to working in charities, can't you?
Yeah, yes, you can. Yeah. We've got a really nice group firm of local accountants that we use that run our payrolls and do our company's accounts and tax returns. Yeah. But I mean, it's probably going to be a cost of several £100 depending on the size of your company. It costs, I think, £400 or £500 for Cae Tan. For that, I mean, that's one of the reasons why Big Meadow has stayed within the legal structure of Cae Tan, because there are economies of scale there. It's much cheaper for Big Meadow to share those costs with Big Meadow by them being part of Cae Tan rather than being their own separate legal entity and having their own costs. I think there's a cost saving on the insurance as well by having them in-house with us, and we share the insurance costs. So our insurance costs have increased through having Big Meadow, but not by, I don't think, by as much as Big Meadow would be paying if they were starting their own completely separate project. Also, there are friendly sort of third sector insurers, and we use Keegan Pennykidd, there's Nature Save, TCV volunteers. There are quite a few insurance companies, the same as you were saying with accountants, that are geared up for third sector companies.
James has put a further question on, Ruth. What's the advantage for consumers of joining a CSA over a normal, just normal veg box scheme?
I think that there are, you build more of a relationship with the grower. Sorry. I think being part of Cae Tan, I mean, obviously we're members as well as a family, has been quite life-changing for us. Knowing the growers and knowing who's grown your veg makes it a lot more valuable, and certainly I put it on the table in front of my children, and they're much less inclined to leave it because they know who's grown it. So that's part of the CS model, is building that relationship with your grower and knowing them. So I've lost my thread a little bit by let me just put the question up again. So, but our members then, I think when we're planning ahead, our members have more say in how Cae Tan works and how it develops. That it's not just we're selling you a veg box. It's more, they have more input into what we do. And some of our members were concerned about veg being left behind. People don't always come and pick it up. So they raised that as an issue. They formed a group of volunteers, and they do amazing work now, making sure that anything that's left behind in the barn by Sunday evening is picked up and it all goes to local food banks. But also members feel more empowered to hold us to account if we if Cae Tan is not being run in a way that they would like it to be run, or the veg boxes are not as as they would like. So they can come along to committee meetings, they can have as much or as little input in that as they want, but it does give members a stronger voice. I think that's the difference. You feel more part of the project. Right? I'm not just a customer, as a member, not setting aside, I'm also a director, but as a member, I'm much more a part of the project, I think, than it's not just about buying a veg box. Does that answer that question?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, thank you.
Rachel's asked how many paid workers and how many volunteers you have.
So for Cae Tan and for Big Meadow, we've got 2 growers. And they work seasonal hours, so they do 4 days in the summer and they are just 2 days in the winter. I mean, I guess it depends whether you're growing winter veg, how much time you need through the winter, and that seems to be, we've always had 2 right from the beginning. But we do supplement that then with Cae Tan have trainees. Every growing season we take on trainees. So we usually have 2 trainees through the European Volunteer Scheme, which is great. They come and they've been having problems with visas because of COVID, but we've just got 1 trainee has arrived. And we have had funding over the last 3 years to take on a UK trainee. So they are paid, their accommodation costs are paid, and then they get sort of a nominal wage of about £50 a week just to cover some of their expenses. But this year we're using the Kickstart scheme. So we've just taken on 4 Kickstart trainees who will be paid minimum wage 25 hours a week for 6 months. So obviously that helps Cae Tan because we've got extra people in the field, and it's also part of what we're about is about training training more young people. I think we've got huge demand for veg box schemes, and we've got landowners who say that they've got land that they would love to give to a CSA, but what's missing locally here in Swansea is enough sufficiently qualified growers that are able to take on the responsibility of running a project, really. So not just working alongside somebody else, but it's that lead grower that's missing, somebody who's going to take on a project. Yeah, so there are different ways. You do have to be careful with trainees, that I talked about, that nominal £50 a week. You've got to be really careful with the minimum wage. So our trainees were paid sort of 5 hours a week for doing the harvest day and being around for veg pickup, and the rest of what they did in the field then was volunteering. But I mean, with our trainees, our salads grower Francesca came to Cae Tan as a trainee one summer and then stayed with us to do the salads growing. Abby, who is running the Big Meadow CSA, came to Cae Tan as a trainee one summer, then has gone on to set up her own CSA within Cae Tan. So it benefits and it helps with our labour, but it's also hugely, I mean, it's the best way to learn, isn't it? It's just hands-on on the field alongside an experienced grower. That's the best way to get the knowledge and the confidence, I think, then to go and start your own project if that's what you want to do. Yeah, there's a question there about community interest company. It is, I mean, a community interest company is just a normal limited company, except that it's you instead of limited, it says community interest company, and in order to get that that title, your work has to benefit the community. You have to really be a social enterprise, so that you're out to benefit the community and you're not for making a profit. Now that doesn't mean that you can't make a surplus. It just means that if you make a surplus, it needs to stay within the business and be ploughed back into the business to further the community aims of your business. So Cae Tan is not a community interest company, it's just a company limited by guarantee, and that has seemed to work for Cae Tan. But other companies that I work for, the tree nursery that I work for is a community interest company, and it does give you a bit of a rubber stamp for applying to funders, or for working with your local council, that you are genuinely not-for-profit social enterprise. Does that answer that question, Maria? Brilliant.
So I think we're up to date with all the questions from the
Okay, lovely.
chat box. Does anybody want to ask Ruth anything else? Well,
sorry, I just have one more, and I've asked quite a few questions.
that's
Just
all right. Carry on.
just on the Cae Tan scale, like you said, you grow for 90 boxes. What's the sort of size and the setup? Are you growing no dig, or are you tilling? How's it all working there?
Tom, I'm not a grower, but Tom does pretty much no dig, I think, James. He plants a lot of green manure and then just is it plough, or you just turn it back in? So he does a lot. He does absolute minimum, I think, digging and ploughing, and then just works. He works a lot with the soil fertility. So he grows organically. We're not actually certified organic. Big Meadow is, Cae Tan isn't, but he grows organically and biodynamically as far as he can as well. Although I don't think he you know, I mean, he does that within the realistic bounds of needing to get things planted when he can, depending on the weather. So yes, but he's down in West Wales brewing potions by moonlight in the winter sometimes, which get put on the field.
And what sort of scale is that? Sorry, in terms
of. So Cae Tan, we're supplying 130 households. So we do large shares and half shares. So a large share really, you know, is for a family, and then a half share or a small share would be more for a couple. So we do 130 households, and that works out about 80 equivalent shares. So about a third of those are large shares, and 2/3 are small shares. So we have a lot more people taking small shares than we do large shares.
And what sort of size acreage is he growing on then?
He's got, I think it's 6 acres on one site, and then it's a bit less. I think the other site is 6 acres, but he's not growing on all of that. So it's probably about 10 in total. But yeah, James, I can I can put you in touch with Tom if you wanted to ask him some more questions on that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've also just put a link further on up where Tom was involved in a webinar that we put on where he does talk through some of those.
Real, thank you.
Yeah, we started off just with the one field in Websfield when we just had the 40 members, and then but there wasn't enough space there to grow the winter veg. So when we wanted to increase our members but more grow the winter veg as well, because that, I think that takes up, it needs more, you know, growing things like potatoes needs a lot of space, it needs a lot of land so that you can allow for the crop rotation, etc. So it was, I think it was when we were scaling up members, but also trying to grow all our winter veg that we needed to increase the amount of land we had. And we've got 4 polytunnels going now with Cae Tan. Big Meadow, we've got 2. So one of the Cae Tan is used for the salads project, and the other 3 Tom uses for growing the Cae Tan veg.
Can you see Patrick's question there, Ruth? Have any of your staff needed mains water to be set up, and the kind of costs involved if you have that to do
both of the Cae Tan sites already had, you know, had a mains water standpipe, but I mean that's an expensive job, I think, isn't it, if you've not got water there already and you've got to hook up to the mains.
I think you can pump out, Patrick, if you've got access to river water, or I've got someone I know who's just looked into it, and she's got kind of a stream that runs alongside her field, and my understanding from Natural Resources Wales is that she can take out 20 litres a day. Now forgive me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
And there's just a question there about low-income families, and we've been mentoring a couple of schemes that we're hoping to start up doing this. If you're doing anything like that, and you're getting into areas where you can start applying for funding if you're going to reach out to low-income families. I know our local community council now have 11 or 12 families that they are that they're working with and they're supporting, and they are buying some of our veg boxes to supply low-income families through the local community council. But also, as I said, we've got if we've got any surplus, it goes in the middle of the barn. We have a swap box, so if people want to swap things in and out of there, they can. And then on our harvest day is on a Thursday. By Sunday tea time, anything that's left in the barn that hasn't been collected is all collected up, and that gets distributed around to local families in need. But yes, I mean, I've worked on a couple of proposals recently for people that want to set up veg box schemes, perhaps based in more deprived areas, where they're getting some people to buy in boxes, to become members and buy in boxes on the basis that some of the income would go to, you know, people on more of a pay as you can or kind of basis, so that people pay a full price if they can, but some boxes then will be supplied out at a lower cost or given for free. So you can make those kind of schemes work. But if you're doing stuff like that, really, the local authority, or there should be some funding to help you do that. I think that last question, would you say CSA is more financially viable? It is giving the grower I know Tom feels quite strongly that what CSA gives is it gives the grower a security of income, so that I mean, when COVID hit, our salads project, which runs within Cae Tan, works more like a sole trader and was just being sold predominantly to cafes and restaurants. Well, COVID hit and those people just stopped buying, completely stopped buying, just as the salad was starting to be ready in the field. So Francesca would put all the work into growing and getting the salads ready, and suddenly there was no market for it. So I mean, it was a scramble, and she survived, and she's been I think her business model is more robust now because she sells into shops, not just to cafes and restaurants. But that was a really good example as to why the strength of the CSA model, because you know, it didn't affect Cae Tan's income at all, because our members are already signed up, and it just carried on. In fact, what did happen was just that the demand went through the roof. We were having so many inquiries every day, people trying to get you know, in the early days of all the panic buying, so many people trying to get veg boxes from us. So it just gives you a reliable income. And you can find with, I mean, obviously farming business is very seasonal, and it means that I find with Cae Tan the demands on our cash are seasonal too. So this time of year, from the 1st of April, our growers have just gone up to their summer hours, so we're paying them 4 days a week now, but we're still buying in a lot of veg because we're in the hungry gap. So this is when, you know, when the cost of buying in veg for Cae Tan and Big Meadow are at their highest. So it hits our cash flow quite hard in this time of year. That's why we ask people to pay deposits and to pay a month up front, so that we've got some working capital to help us through this period where the demands on our cash are higher.
Steve, would you mind explaining, you've said that you've just been quoted £1,500 from Tyfu Cymru to provide a new connection to your community growing project. Do you mean, I don't know, connection to the mains, or?
Yeah, hi there.
Yeah.
I can't turn my video on, I'm afraid, but
That's okay.
My bandwidth won't allow. Yeah, so basically we've took on a what was set aside as a community allotment site in Llandyssil, but we're now running it as a community growing area, so it'll be, rather than 8 separate allotments, it will be one large site. Now, when we took the site on a peppercorn rent from Carmarthenshire Council, there were 4 water standpipes on the site. So we presumed on that basis there was some main supply, and then having now taken on the site and not having rain for best part of 6 weeks, realised that there isn't a mains connection. So we've been desperately sort of rushing back and forth with water butts and cans, and we haven't yet got the means to do our own. We're trying to, you know, eventually be more self-sustainable with our water supply. So we had Tyfu Cymru finally come out only last Friday, and they located the nearest water mains, which is literally 15 meters off the edge of the site and the neighbour's driveway. And for that connection, just to bring it to the boundary, which was probably only 5 meters tops, that was what we were quoted, £1,500. And for that, we will have to bring our own pipework up to the boundary, and they will also have to come and inspect that pipework and sign it off to make the connection. And I presume that £1,500 includes a meter as well, so that we'll be able to, monitor our water usage.
Oh yes.
I did quiz them about what they meant by inspecting the pipework, and the lady said, well, effectively we're providing you with an agricultural water supply, but it will be potable water, and so standard 20 mil agricultural alkathene pipe would be acceptable. That's the sort of standard pipe work they're looking at, and mainly, I suppose, they want to be sure you're not creating leaks in the system, I guess. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And for your comments as well about reaching out to lower income families, Steve, that's helpful.
Yeah, that's just part of what we're trying to do to generate interest in the project as well, is kind of sort of putting these troughs out in the community, particularly sort of up on the housing estate in the top of town where there's more lower income families, and trying to generate that interest in growing. Just feel because we're a youth organisation as well, it's how we're engaging the young people as well in healthy eating generally and growing. And a lot of them they're a lot keener now, having been locked up for the last year or so. We've got lots of our young people really hands-on now, getting involved with digging and planting up, which is great, you know.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. So I'm aware of the time. We were due to run, I think, till 11:30. So unless there's any further specific questions, my feeling is that there's some things that have come out of this actually that it might be pertinent for Tyfu Cymru to explore a bit further actually, and see if we can put some sessions on, maybe around water use. I think we've done a session on water use before, but perhaps around that, and maybe some kind of financial forecasting and spreadsheet stuff, Ruth. I think we'll have a look into some of that, but it's been really useful. Thanks very much indeed. And again, if there's anything that any of you want to come back to Tyfu Cymru with, then, or me, please do, and we'll put the support in place for you. Sarah's put in the chat the next sessions that are up and coming. There's one this Thursday, which I said before was using Facebook and Instagram. There's an asparagus one, which I'm involved with on Monday the 10th. And then on the 17th, there's basic health and safety online. So good practical sessions there. So I'll say thanks very much indeed, everybody. And hopefully I'll be coming to visit some of you over the coming months.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.